Sometimes a single moment of genuine compassion in the midst of chaos can change the course of everything. In a storm, where the world seems cold and indifferent, one brave act of kindness can light up the darkness and sow seeds of hope that grow for years. This is not a tale of grand gestures or loud promises, but a quietly powerful story of how a simple choice can bridge two lives, create unspoken bonds, and remind us that even in our darkest hours, warmth is just a heartbeat away. Welcome to Taqnix, where every story is a testament to the strength of empathy and the power of quiet heroism. It began on a night when the rain poured relentlessly. She never even learned his name or asked about his troubled past. Without a second thought, she pulled over on the roadside and offered a ride to a soldier who was limping through the storm. He was clearly wounded, and despite the pounding rain, she made him tea, wrapped him in a warm blanket, and let him sleep on her couch while her daughter peacefully dreamt in the next room. Before the first light of dawn, he quietly left. No, goodbyes were exchanged. All that remained was a small metal token near the sink, and a silence that would echo in her life for weeks afterward. Days later, when the looming threat of foreclosure began closing in on her world, there was an unexpected knock at the door. Standing there wasn't a stranger this time, but the very soldier she had helped on that bitter, stormy night. And on this visit, he was not alone. The rain had drummed on continuously, hammering on the windshield of Emily's pickup truck as she navigated the winding two-lane road on the outskirts of Millfield, Pennsylvania, a tiny town where every face and every license plate was known by heart. The kind of rain that sneaks up on you, chills your bones even when you're tucked safely inside. It was nearly 7:46 p.m. on that day, and Emily was far from home. A broken-down delivery van at the bakery where she worked had kept her late into the night, and though it was an inconvenience, she never complained. At 35, Emily lived a simple, hard-working life. Mornings spent at the diner, evenings filled with laundry, homework sessions with her daughter, and regular calls to her aging mother. She wasn't one to travel much or share her life on social media. Her pickup truck was a decade old, her boots even older. Emily didn't ask for much but always gave what little she had. And on that rain-soaked night, her only offering was a ride and the burden of a decision. Through the watery blur on the bay truck's window, Emily noticed him. A man walking alone along the roadside, drenched completely. His heavy backpack pulled him forward in a noticeable limp, his posture marked by fatigue and pain. He wore a dark green jacket, typical of those seen on soldiers, and his cropped hair and serious expression gave him a military look. As soon as she slowed down to offer help, her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Don't pick up strangers, especially not alone in the dark, her instincts warned her. But then, a distant memory surfaced, a snippet of her father's voice during a similar storm, suggesting that sometimes when you see someone struggling, it might be your turn to step up. So, Emily pulled over. The man, initially silent, seemed uncertain at first. Maybe he had not expected anyone to stop, or perhaps he was unsure of her intentions. But when she rolled down her window and leaned in to ask if he was all right, he slowly looked up. His hood shifted back, revealing a deep, ragged scar running from his temple down past his jaw. It was unmistakably raw and uneven, as if etched by old, burning flames. For a long moment, they simply locked eyes, words unnecessary amid the steady pitter-patter of the rain. "Hey," Emily said gently, "are you okay out there?" Without much hesitation, the man replied in a rough yet steady voice that he had no ID on him. It turned out he had just been honorably discharged from the military, even though he wore his wound with a certain quiet dignity. After a brief pause, Emily opened her passenger door and said, "I'm heading past the base turnoff. I can drop you off at the gate." He hesitated before nodding his silent thanks as he climbed in, the cabin quickly filling with the scent of wet canvas and lingering fatigue. As he settled into the seat, Emily couldn't help but notice the care with which he cradled his injured dude. It was evident he was still nursing old wounds. Their conversation was sparse at first, punctuated only by the constant drumming of the rain on the metal truck. When she finally asked if he was in the army, he confirmed it with a simple nod and a dry comment about his recent discharge. His polite, almost fleeting smile made her wonder if he had ever expected anything more, anything that could make this lonely journey worthwhile. Before long, the base's turnoff came into view. The dim light of a few street lamps, a rusted sign peeking through overgrown ivy, and a small security booth marked the entrance. Emily offered, "I can let you out here," but the soldier hesitated at the gate. He seemed caught between taking the necessary steps forward and the burden of a past that clung to him like the heavy backpack he carried. At that moment, she asked softly, "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" The question wasn't coercive. It was filled with genuine concern. His guarded look and quiet resignation revealed a story of hardship and solitude. His answer was brief. He would find a place, but Emily sensed there was more beneath the surface. Even then, with every bit of rain that streamed down the window, it was clear that the compassion he found with Emily was something he desperately needed, even if he would never admit it fully. 10 minutes later, Logan Wells sat quietly at the small kitchen table in Emily's modest trailer, rainwater still dripping from his clothes. Her daughter Mia had peeked out from the hallway once, clinging to a stuffed bear before Emily softly guided her back to bed. Emily wasn't reckless. She didn't take chances with her daughter's safety. But something about this man didn't set off any alarms. He didn't feel threatening. If anything, he seemed exhausted, like someone who had been through too much too soon. There was something in his eyes, a look of someone who had seen things most people couldn't imagine. She handed him a towel and a mug of tea. "You don't owe me anything," she said plainly. He nodded, but before she could turn away, he carefully reached into his soaked backpack and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Inside was a military medal, aged but whole, attached to a blue and white ribbon. "A Purple Heart," Emily whispered, recognizing it immediately. Logan didn't say much. He nodded slightly. "Afghanistan. Third tour. I keep it wrapped like that so I don't lose it." She didn't ask for more. Instead, she gently folded the cloth back over the medal and slid it across the table toward him, showing quiet respect in place of questions. That night, Logan slept on her couch. Emily brought him extra blankets and left a note on the coffee table with the Wi-Fi password and instructions for making coffee in the morning. She didn't pry. She didn't push. And before the sun had even lifted the fog from the cornfields outside, he was gone. No farewell. No message. Just the folded towel on the couch and the Purple Heart placed gently next to the sink. Emily stood there in her kitchen, one hand on the counter and the other covering her mouth, staring at the medal. She didn't understand it then, but something had shifted. A small spark had been lit that would grow into something much larger, something neither of them could have foreseen. 12 days passed. The towel remained on the cushion where he had rested. The Purple Heart sat in the kitchen drawer, resting beside some pens, a few spare keys, and a rubber band ball Mia had made in school. Emily hadn't spoken a word of that night to anyone. Not her co-workers, not her mother, not even her closest friend Nora. She wasn't sure how to explain it anyway. It wasn't logic or instinct. It wasn't even charity. It was something smaller and quieter, like responding to a call she didn't even know she'd heard. Now in those early hours before dawn, with her daughter asleep and the heater ticking softly in the background, she felt it deep inside. The storm hadn't disappeared. It had simply shifted inward. 2 days later, a letter arrived. It was tucked into her mailbox, half soaked from the morning rain. No return address, no stamp. Inside was a single line, written in shaky, uneven handwriting, "You." Reminded me I still mattered. I'll find a way to repay that. LW, that was it. No explanation, no contact information, just the words. Emily read the message over and over until the ink blurred, and then she folded it in half and placed it in the same drawer as the medal. She closed it gently, like she was placing flowers on a grave. But life didn't pause. Few days later, a thick envelope from the local credit union confirmed what she had feared. She didn't need to open it to know what it meant. The foreclosure process had begun. Her father's old house, the one she had grown up in, the one she inherited with more damage than structure, was now officially in danger. The missed mortgage payments had piled up, the interest kept growing, and the warning letters she had ignored out of fear had finally caught up with her. She had tried everything. Her job at the bakery barely paid enough to survive. The side hustle. She ran at the farmer's market, brought in just enough for groceries. She'd already sold her mother's jewelry. She even canceled the internet 3 times before having to reconnect it for Mia's schoolwork. Every cut had been made except the ones that would take away her daughter's comfort. Mia deserved warmth. She deserved walls that stayed up and lights that stayed on. Emily stared at the second page of the letter. 30 days. That's how long she had before the house would be repossessed, boxed up, and sold. Still, she kept showing up to work like nothing had changed. She smiled at customers. She poured coffee and boxed up pies. She wiped down booths at closing time. No one noticed anything different. Emily had always been the same, quiet, reliable, kind. But kindness didn't stop the bills. Kindness couldn't explain to her daughter why their home might not be theirs in a month. One night, as she wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, Nora finally said something. "Okay," she started, planting her elbows on the diner counter. "What's going on?" Emily glanced up, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "You've been spacing out for a week," Nora said. "You forgot snack day, and today you gave Officer Clay his coffee without cinnamon. That man lives for cinnamon." "I've just been distracted," Emily offered weakly. "No," Nora said, walking around the counter to face her. "You're drowning." Emily hesitated, then told her. Not everything, but enough. About the letter, the mortgage, the ticking clock. She couldn't slow down. Nora didn't gasp or scold. She just leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "Well, that sucks." Emily let out a watery laugh, surprised at herself. "Yeah, it really does." The following morning, after dropping Mia off at school, Emily drove past the old VFW hall on the edge of town. A handmade sign out front caught her attention. Veteran Support Breakfast. This Saturday, all welcome. She almost kept driving. She had no idea why she'd even consider stopping, but something made her ease off the gas. Maybe it was the metal. Maybe it was the letter. Maybe it was the sound of Logan's voice that night, saying he didn't have many options. When Saturday arrived, she showed up, arms full of warm honey oat loaves, her best recipe, wrapped neatly in cloth. Inside, the setup was simple. Folding tables, dented coffee pots, and about a dozen veterans in worn baseball caps and faded jeans. They greeted her with nods, quiet, respectful. A few recognized her from the diner. One older man, hunched with age, offered to carry her tray. She still didn't know what she was doing there. But she stayed. She served breakfast, poured coffee, smiled. No one asked for her story, and she didn't offer it. But it felt right to be there. As she wiped down a table in the back, a younger veteran, maybe in his early 30s, sharp-eyed and calm, looked up from his plate. "You're Emily Rhodes, right?" he asked. She froze. "Yeah," she replied cautiously. The man stood, brushing off his hands. "I think you know someone I served with." Her heart thudded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo. Not a letter, just a picture. In it, Logan Wells stood in full military gear, resting on crutches, a bandage wrapped around part of his face, surrounded by 5 other soldiers. "He sent this a few weeks ago," the man said. "Told us he met someone in Pennsylvania," said. She reminded him of who he used to be. Emily stared at the photo, speechless. "I didn't even know he still had people," she said softly. The man gave a small smile. "Logan doesn't say much these days. Not since the fire, but when he does, it means something." He handed her the photo. "Thank you for seeing him. Most people don't." That night, Emily pinned the photo above her kitchen sink. It wasn't much, but to her it felt like a thread, tying her small world to something bigger than herself, something worth holding on to. 3 more weeks passed. The foreclosure deadline hung over her like a silent cloud. Each day brought it closer. She tried everything, calling the credit union, pleading for more time, asking about extensions. But the response was always the same: polite, impersonal, unmoving. "Unless something major changes, Ms. Rhodes," the woman on the phone told her. "We're out of options." Then came the knock. It was just past 7 p.m. Emily had finished setting the table. Simple tomato soup and grilled cheese, nothing fancy, but Mia's favorite. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the front door. 2 men in uniform stood on her porch. Not police, not local officers. Behind them, 2 black SUVs idled at the curb. Between the uniformed men stood someone she instantly recognized: Logan. Wells. This time he was clean-shaven, dressed in full military formal wear. No rein, no limp, no backpack. Just Logan, standing steady in the porch light, holding a thin envelope in his hand. For a moment, Emily couldn't move. She stood in the doorway, clutching the towel, staring at him in disbelief. "Logan," she whispered. He nodded gently. "Evening, Emily." Behind him, the 2 uniformed men remained silent. One wore the stripes of a master sergeant. The other had a captain's insignia. Their stance was formal but respectful. Emily's heart raced, her throat tightened. She looked from Logan to the envelope in his hand. What is this?" Logan stepped forward carefully. No trace of pain in his stride now. Either he'd healed or he'd grown strong enough to carry it differently. "It's long overdue," he said, placing the envelope gently into her hand. "But it's just the beginning." "Beginning of what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the men behind him. "Gentlemen." The captain stepped forward and extended his hand. "Ms. Rhodes, I'm Captain Stephen Marks, U.S. Army. We're here on behalf of the Office of Veteran Community Engagement and the 5th Special Recon Unit." Emily nodded slowly, feeling suddenly unsteady on her feet. "We'd like to speak with you," the captain continued. "If now's a good time." She stepped aside without a word, operating on instinct. From the hallway, Mia peeked out, barefoot and wide-eyed in her pajamas. "It's okay, sweetheart," Emily said quickly. "Just some visitors." Captain Marks smiled warmly, crouching down slightly to meet Mia's eyes. "Hi there. I'm Stephen." Mia clutched her bear. "Are you real soldiers?" Logan kneeled beside her. "We are," he said gently. "But we're not here for a mission. We're here to thank your mom." "Why?" Mia asked. Logan looked at Emily. "Because she helped someone when no one else would." They sat around the small kitchen table. Emily, Logan, the captain, and the master sergeant. Mia, after getting a promise of ice cream the next day, returned to her room clutching her bear. The envelope Logan had handed her still sat unopened in front of her. Logan was the first to speak. "Emily, the night you picked me up, I was in a worse place than I let on." She nodded, already feeling the heaviness of what was coming. "I'd just been discharged from a VA rehab center in Harrisburg, not because I was ready, because they were full. Budget cuts." Emily winced. "I didn't have a home to go back to. My ID was lost in the fire that took my place in Arizona. Didn't even have bus fare. I was walking to Wilton because I thought a guy I served with used to live there. No idea if he still did." He looked down for a second. "I wasn't just cold that night, Emily. I was done." A quiet chill spread through the room, deeper than any winter draft. "You didn't know," he continued, "but in my pack there was a bottle, still sealed, my last one. I was going to find a quiet place and just disappear." Her hand gripped the edge of the table. "Logan," but then you stopped. His voice wasn't shaking, but it was lower now, steadier. "You didn't ask for details. You didn't flinch at the scars. You didn't look at me like I was broken. You handed me a towel and let me feel human for the first time in months." Her eyes began to sting, but she didn't look away. "I emailed my team that night," Logan said, turning toward the captain and sergeant. "Told them something rare happened. Something decent. They passed it up the chain. Word got around. The captain picked it up from there. Ms. Rhodes, we're here because what you didn't go unnoticed." He pulled a document from a black folder and slid it across the table. It was a formal letter. The Department of Defense seal shimmered at the top. Bold letters read, "Certificate of Community Honor. Awarded to Ms. Emily Rhodes." Beneath it, the I. Text read, "For outstanding compassion, bravery, and quiet service to a wounded veteran of the United States Army, Emily Rhodes is hereby recognized as an honorary civilian contributor to veteran recovery initiatives, with all corresponding privileges and acknowledgments." At the bottom was a gold seal and the signature of the Secretary of the Army. Emily stared at it in disbelief. "That's the actual secretary?" The captain smiled. "Yes, ma'am, but it didn't end there." The master sergeant placed a second document beside the first. This one looked less official, more personal. "This part," he said, "was Logan's idea." Emily picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. It was a letter from a private military nonprofit, one she had never heard of before, a foundation run by veterans and funded by anonymous donors. And in it was a single sentence that made her breath catch in her throat. "This letter confirms full acquisition and forgiveness of mortgage debt associated with the property at 412 County Road, Millfield, Pennsylvania. Her home, her childhood home, saved." She couldn't hold the tears back now. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why would they do all this for me?" Logan's voice was softer now. "Because that night what you did wasn't just about me. It reminded all of us that kindness still exists, and that matters more than you know." They didn't stay long, just long enough to answer questions, to see her smile through her tears, and to promise they'd be in touch. As they got ready to leave, Logan paused. "I've got one more thing," he said. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a thick metal coin, engraved and polished. Emily turned it over in her hand. One side showed the emblem of Logan's military unit. The other side had a phrase. She didn't ask. She just acted. Logan explained. "It's a challenge coin, usually reserved for acts of valor in the military, but sometimes we give them to civilians who remind us what we fight for." Emily didn't know what to say. She simply nodded and closed her hand around the coin. Later that night, after Mia was asleep, Emily sat by the window wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the stars. She thought about all the nights she had stayed up wondering how to hold everything together, how to be seen in a world that never looked her way. And now someone had seen her, someone had come back. In the days after the soldiers left, Emily moved through her life differently. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, but something inside her had shifted. She washed dishes while glancing at the framed certificate on the wall. She passed by the drawer, where Logan's medal and the challenge coin now rested side by side, and felt a quiet warmth in her chest. Her house was safe now. She could finally breathe. But more than that, something deeper had taken root. A sense of meaning she hadn't realized. She was missing, not pride, not attention, just purpose. Gentle, solid, and grounding. News of the visit didn't stay quiet for long. Small towns had their own way of spreading stories. First, it was subtle. Customers hanging around the bakery counter a little, longer than usual, pretending to browse while eyeing Emily. Then came the questions. "Was that really military brass outside your house? You doing okay? Heard something about a letter from Washington, that true?" Some folks were just curious. A few seemed doubtful, but others looked at her differently now, not with awe, but with genuine respect. Not the kind you ask, for the kind you earn when no one's looking. 3 weeks after the visit, another envelope arrived. This one had an official seal from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Inside was a brief note and an invitation. Ms. Emily Rhodes, on behalf of the Veteran Resilience Network of Eastern Pennsylvania, We would be honored if you'd consider serving as a community advisor for our civilian support initiative. It included a phone number, an email address, and at the bottom a handwritten line in Logan's blocky script, "Just show up." That's all you ever needed to do. Emily didn't reply right away. She left the envelope on the kitchen table, glancing at it between folding laundry and packing Mia's lunch. She didn't feel qualified. She hadn't served. She didn't have any degrees or credentials. And she barely even understood what Civilian Support Initiative really meant. But the memory kept pulling her back. Logan, soaked and silent, sitting in her truck. The weight in his voice when he said, "You didn't flinch at the scars." Maybe it wasn't about having the right background. Maybe it was just about being the kind of person who doesn't look away. Emily said yes. The meetings were small and simple at first. Once a week she drove to a modest office space outside Wilton, a converted shipping container with mismatched chairs and coffee that tasted a bit like burnt rubber. She wasn't asked to do much, just to listen, to speak when she felt something. Real was worth saying, and slowly she did. She talked about growing up with a father who had flinched at every 4th of July firework, a Vietnam vet who rarely spoke of the past but never fully left it behind. She talked about raising her daughter alone, always one bill away from collapse. And she talked about Logan, about the night that changed everything, about what it meant to choose kindness without expecting anything in return. The group listened. They nodded. They shared in return. And word began to spread. That spring, after one of the sessions, a man named Harvey waited beside her car in the gravel lot. He was in his 60s, weathered skin, strong shoulders, and a stiffness in his step that said more than age ever could. "You know," he said, lighting a cigarette with hands that had clearly seen labor, "I used to think civilians didn't get it." Emily glanced at him. "Some probably don't." He nodded. "True, but you didn't have to get it to show up. You just did." He took a long drag, flicked the ash, and said, "We need more people like that." Emily looked out at the rows of sunlit rooftops, their metal flashing in the afternoon light. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like anything special, but she felt present. And maybe that was enough. Back in Millfield, life went on. Mia turned 9. The bakery gave Emily more hours and a key to open up when Dottie couldn't. Nora still came over on Friday nights, sometimes with wine, always with sarcasm. She still teased Emily about being the town hero, but now it came with a proud smile. Strangers started coming by, too. Veterans she'd never met before. Some from nearby towns, some from far off. They didn't stay long. A few just wanted coffee. Some left folded notes. Some only nodded. But every one of them carried the same look Logan had that first night. The look of someone who didn't think anyone would notice them. And every time, Emily did. Then came the storm. Not the kind with thunder and wind, though April did bring its share of gloomy skies. This storm was quieter, but heavier. It came in the form of a voicemail left on her phone one Wednesday afternoon. "Hey, Emily, it's Greg from County Services. Sorry to bother you, but something odd popped up in the property records. Could you come by when you get a chance?" Her stomach sank before she even finished listening. The office was dim and cluttered, file boxes stacked everywhere. Greg, a small man with too many pens in his pocket, looked uncomfortable. "I know the Army folks cleared your mortgage," he said, tapping a document on the desk. "But when we scanned your deed last week, something showed up." Emily leaned. "What kind of something?" "A lien," Greg said. "From 20 years ago, before your dad passed." She blinked. "A lien? For what?" "Apparently it's from a loan he took out after your mom died. It was buried in the records. No one flagged it because the debt was sold to a private agency. But now, out of nowhere, they filed a claim." He paused, clearly unsure how to keep going. "Technically, they have legal rights to the land behind your house, the acreage with your garden and the shed." Emily felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "But the mortgage," she started. "Covers the house," Greg said gently. "Not the land. That was always filed separately." She drove home in silence. Her hands clutched the steering, wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Her house was safe, but not her land. And without the land, would it even feel like home? That night, after Mia had fallen asleep, Emily sat on the porch and stared out across the quiet silhouette of the fields. The same fields her father used to tend with hands twice as tired as hers. The same shed that held tools, old jars, and memories. She couldn't lose this. Not again. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to Logan's name, typed, "Hi, Logan. I know. You've already done more than I could ever ask. But something's come up." She hesitated, then hit send and whispered into the night, "Please, let kindness keep going." Logan called the next morning. He didn't press for details, he didn't ask why. He just listened, then said, "I'll take care of it." 3 days later, a man in a tailored charcoal suit walked into the county services office, briefcase in hand, government credentials in his pocket. No loud statements, no threats. He simply handed over a legal document with a judge's seal and a federal stamp. The lien was fraudulent. The company that filed it. A shell operation already under federal investigation. The land was hers, completely, permanently. Emily sat in her truck and cried for 10 straight minutes before she could even turn the key in the ignition. When she called Logan to thank him, he didn't boast or explain. "You already paid it forward," he said simply. "I just made sure it didn't stop moving." Still in tears, she said, "I don't know how to repay you." His voice, as always, was steady. "You already did. You just don't know it yet." Later that week, she found a small envelope tucked into her mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note. "What you grow in quiet places will one day feed someone you've never met." At the bottom, one word, "Seer," Latin for always. She folded the note, placed it in the drawer beside the medal and coin, and sat in silence. Not a silence of loss, but one full of meaning, full of everything that had taken root because of a single night, a single choice. By the time summer arrived, the lilac bushes at the edge of her yard were in full bloom. Their scent floated through the open kitchen windows, while bees drifted lazily between the rows of her garden. The land, now fully hers, felt different, more alive, more real. She stood barefoot in the soil one morning, a woven basket in hand, lifting ripe tomatoes from the vine. Dew glistened on the leaves. Chickens clucked nearby. It was a simple scene. The kind of moment most people wouldn't notice, but to her it was everything. The daughter she almost lost the house for still slept soundly in the next room. The pantry was full from a garden no one could take. The porch, once quiet and full, the fear was now full of laughter most evenings. Life hadn't just returned to the home. It had returned to her. Logan didn't visit often, but when he did, he never came alone. He brought people with him. Quiet, respectful veterans who didn't talk much but showed up with purpose. They didn't come to chat. They came to help. One repaired a broken fence. Another rewired the old shed. Someone fixed the squeaky latch on the front gate, handling it like it was top-level security. They never stayed long. But what they left behind was more lasting than tools or repairs. They left behind something stronger: respect, community, and a quiet kind of protection. One of them, a man named Reggie who barely spoke, showed up a week after the land issue had been resolved. Without asking, he installed solar panels on Emily's roof. She stepped outside and called up to him. "I didn't ask for these." Reggie gave a small nod, never stopping his work. Logan said sunlight helps things grow. At the farmer's market, people lingered longer at her table now. Some asked for bread, some brought homemade pies. One woman from 2 towns over simply hugged Emily, whispered, "You reminded my son that he still matters," and left before Emily could even get her name. They all seemed to know her now. But it wasn't fame. It was something quieter, something deeper. It was the kind of recognition you earn through grace, not noise. A reverence not for heroes, but for healers. One Sunday morning, while she was organizing fresh produce at her stand, Emily saw someone approaching from the other side of the lot. tall, broad-shouldered, and walking with a calm, steady pace that no longer hinted at injury. Logan. He was in civilian clothes this time, simple jeans and a flannel shirt. But even without the uniform, he still moved like a soldier, still carried himself like one. She smiled and walked around the stand to greet him. "You're early," she teased. He gave a small shrug. Didn't want the strawberries to sell out. Without asking, she handed him a basket. They sat together on the tailgate of her truck, parked under the old oak tree. Neither spoke for a while. Some moments don't need words. Some stories are best told in quiet. Eventually, Logan broke the silence. "I've been asked to take a new position," he said, slowly twisting the strawberry stem between his fingers. She looked over. "Where?" "Washington," he said. "Advisory role. Civilian veteran engagement. They want someone who knows both sides." Emily gave him a soft smile. "Sounds like something made for you," he chuckled. "I'm still figuring it out." Then he hesitated. "I don't want to leave," he said after a beat. She didn't interrupt. "But I also don't want to stay, if it means I'm hiding from what I meant to do." She nodded slowly. "Then go. But come back when you're ready." He looked at her the way someone might look at a sunrise. Quiet awe, like something sacred had just been said. That evening, he helped her pack up after the market. As they finished, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver pin. Simple, clean, shaped like a seed. "This is part of something new," he explained. "The Kindness Initiative, quiet acts, real things. We give this to people who keep it moving." She turned the pin over in her palm. It was cool and solid. "I'm not the hero," she said gently. Logan gestured toward the market, the people, the land, the laughter drifting from the nearby lot. "No," he said. "You're the one who planted what others will grow from." The seasons changed again. Mia started 5th grade, her backpack covered in patches and her heart a little stronger. The house stayed warm through the fall, powered by sunlight and grit. Emily, without realizing it, had become an anchor for others. The support group she once attended, it was hers now. She led it. She organized community meals, helped build a small memorial garden near the town library, connected military widows with other veterans' families. She didn't stand behind podiums or give speeches, but when she spoke, people listened, because she had earned their silence first. One snowy night, as she was locking up the bakery, a car pulled into the parking lot. A young man stepped out, nervous, shoulders tight beneath his oversized coat. "Are you the woman who helped Logan Wells?" he asked. Emily paused. "I was one of them." He nodded quickly. His voice was shaky. "I'm his cousin. We hadn't talked in years, but he wrote to our family last month." He reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. "He asked me to give this to you." Then he turned and left. Back home, Emily sat beneath the glow of her living room lamp and carefully opened the letter. Inside was a short note written in Logan's familiar, blocky handwriting. "Emily, I used to believe the battlefield was what defined us, that only in war did we truly find out who we were. But I was wrong. Kindness does the same thing. It reveals us, softens what war tried to harden. You didn't just give me a ride. You gave me permission to keep living, and through that you gave something to every person I've helped since. The road you opened in me, I'll keep walking it. Thank you for seeing me when I was fading. Seer, Logan." Her hands trembled as she folded the letter. Quiet tears fell, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something sacred. She got up and walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer. Inside were the purple heart, the challenge coin, the small handwritten note that read, "What you grow in quiet places." Given now Logan's letter, she placed them all inside a small wooden box and carried it to the living room. She set it carefully on the mantel above the fireplace, not as a shrine, but as a reminder, a quiet monument to how lives can change. Not loudly, but silently. Not with fanfare, but with roots. Roots that grow unseen until the harvest shows up years later. In the spring, Emily began something new. She made a wooden sign and staked it into the ground near her garden. Free produce. For veterans. No questions asked if you've served. Let the earth serve you now. She didn't advertise it. She didn't post about it. But they came. Some left with arms full of vegetables. Some left with tears. Others just stood silently, gave a nod, and walked away without taking anything. And one day, a young soldier just stood at the edge of the garden for nearly 15 minutes. Didn't say a word. Before leaving, he looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Emily watched him go, then turned back to the rows of green. On her birthday, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a framed replica of the purple heart she had once held for Logan. But this time, it came with something else. A photo. Logan, standing at a podium in Washington, speaking into a microphone, hand over his chest. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, were the words, "She didn't ask. She just acted." And beneath it, Emily Rhodes. She stared at the frame for a long time, then hung it on the wall beside the pantry. Not because it needed a special place, but because she wanted to see it every time she fed someone. To remember where it all started. A night, a truck, and the decision to move towards someone instead of away, because sometimes the smallest seed you plant during a storm becomes the harvest that feeds everyone who comes after. And Emily, she never stopped planting, not just in her garden, not just in her home, but in the hearts of others, in the kinds of places most people overlooked, the places where real healing starts. Her story became known, not because she told it, but because others carried it, and every time someone asked how it all began, she'd smile softly and say, "It was raining, that's all I remember," because in her heart, she knew the truth. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, and it usually begins where no one's looking. Not everyone who helps wants the spotlight. Some just want to make sure that for one more night, someone isn't going hungry, that someone has a light left on, that someone still feels seen. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change everything. Emily never chased recognition. She never sought out credit. But still, people noticed. Veterans started stopping by the market, some from other counties, others from across the state. A few would buy a loaf of bread. Some came just to say thanks. Others didn't say anything at all. They just left small, folded notes on the table, or quietly helped stack crates before disappearing again. They didn't need to say it. She saw it in their eyes. The same look Logan had on that rainy night. The look of someone who'd nearly given up, only to be reminded they still mattered. Emily noticed them. And that was enough. By summer, her little produce stand had turned into a gathering point. Not a big one, just a few folding tables and baskets full of vegetables. But it felt important. One day, she found a man sitting on the bench near her stand. He was older, weathered, his arms crossed loosely, a ball cap pulled low over his eyes. When she approached, he simply said, "You're the one Logan talked about." She nodded. He smiled faintly. "Figured I'd come see for myself." That was how most conversations started now. Not with introductions, but with meaning. People didn't want to hear about her. They wanted to feel what she'd made real, and every single time Emily made space, she shared what she had, and they left lighter. Weeks later, a letter came. This one was from Logan again, but not a handwritten note. It was official looking. Inside was a small invitation, printed on thick paper. "You are invited to speak at the Veterans Resilience Gala, Washington, D.C., honoring community partners who make a difference quietly, but powerfully." Emily stood in her kitchen staring at the envelope for a long while. She didn't know what she'd say, but deep down she knew she'd go, because the story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt invisible until someone stopped for them. Everyone who had been on the edge and had been pulled back, not by force, but by kindness. At the gala, she didn't prepare a speech. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage in a borrowed dress and simple shoes. The room was filled with polished uniforms and quiet respect. She took a deep breath. "I don't know why I'm here," she began, the room silent. "But I know what it feels like to be drowning and have someone toss you a rope, without asking for anything in return. She paused, looked out at the room. Someone once told me you just showed up. And maybe that's all we need to do more of. And with that, she stepped down. No applause was needed. The moment itself was enough. That fall, a group of veterans and volunteers returned to Millfield. They helped expand her garden, built a greenhouse, installed a small wooden bench under the oak tree near the porch. On it, a metal plaque. She didn't ask, she just acted. It was quiet. It was perfect. Mia grew taller, wiser, happier. The bakery stayed busy. The community stronger. The porch, full of laughter and warm soup and late-night talks. And Emily? She kept planting. She kept noticing. She kept showing up because she understood something now. Something she'd lived and breathed and witnessed firsthand. Sometimes the most powerful kind of change doesn't come from a speech or a headline. It comes from a decision, a hand on the wheel, a stranger in the rain, a door left open when it would have been easier to shut it. And when that kind of kindness moves, it keeps moving, like a ripple, like a seed, like a story worth telling. So if you ever wonder whether small choices matter, remember this one: a woman, a truck, and a moment that rewrote more lives than she would ever know. Because in the end, it's not about being the hero. It's about being the one who sees someone and acts, even when no one's watching.